Hi, this is Andrew Egger with the Bulwark. We got a little bit of a shakeup in the Trump appointments game yesterday. He pulled the former pick for Surgeon General that he had been rolling with, a former doctor a doctor who's a Fox News contributor. He's going in a different direction. Casey Means is Donald Trump's new pick to be the U.S. Surgeon General. She's kind of an interesting character in a whole lot of ways. We're going to break it all down today, talk about it. I'm joined by Jonathan Cohn, our top policy reporter, and Will Sommer, our in-house expert in all things right wing and wild. So thanks, guys. Let's talk a little bit about the background of this person. Where's she come from? Where did Donald Trump pick this woman up off the street to be the next potentially the next Surgeon General of the United States, Jonathan?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at her biography, and it starts in a very traditional way for a Surgeon General, right? So she goes to Stanford, she goes to Stanford Medical School, ends up in residency in Oregon for becoming a head and neck surgeon, and then somewhere during residency, she decides this isn't for her. And the story she tells is that she had this sort of epiphany doing surgery one day that the medical profession, the medical establishment, our whole healthcare system was very focused on treating people when they are sick and not at all focused on why they got sick and keeping them healthy. And so she kind of, at that point, there's like a turn off the sort of normal, the standard road of kind of American medicine. She turns into a sort of a writer, a thinker, entrepreneur, an evangelist for healthy living and her ideas about it. She does a lot of work with her brother, who is also they also went to Stanford, then actually ended up at Harvard Business School, and he is sort of through his own path and his own epiphany. The two of them end up doing a lot of work, sort of coming up with this sort of ideas about what is wrong with American medicine and how to fix it. And it's all about good health, that we as a country we're not focused on on diet, on exercise, and then she's got a whole theory worked out, and there's a whole scientific explanation she gives, or what she considers a scientific explanation. Some would question it, and she ends up on the radar screen of RFK and right wing. And actually, I think that's probably where Will probably can kind of pick up the story better than I can.
Yeah, sure. So Casey and Callie Means, her brother, they have this book that came out a few years ago called, I believe, Good Energy, bestseller. It's a lot of get a lot more sunlight. We sort of started to enter maybe the world of people maybe familiar with like Andrew Huberman, this kind of stuff. This is kind of like a softer, kind of more spiritual version of that. And then basically she goes on Rogan. It becomes hugely popular based on that, and some other. She goes on Tucker eventually. And then during RFK's presidential campaign, she kind of goes into the RFK orbit. And so that's where these kind of Casey and Callie Means. I started hearing last year a lot of people saying, Trump supporters saying that, these are kind of like the vanguards of the Make America Healthy Again movement.
Yeah, yeah. The business about the kind of epiphany right at the end is of her kind of formal training there is so interesting to me. I personally had sort of an epiphany that pulled me out of potentially wanting to go into medicine, but it was in 11th grade. I realized I was kind of the idea of blood and wounds being around me kind of made me faint and unhappy. Didn't like the idea of it. Went in a different direction, which in the end, I don't know. I guess I don't get to be the Surgeon General of the United States. So it's not, I guess you wouldn't really call it a sunk cost completely to have gone through all of that. But it is very late in the game. This whole wellness business, it's so fascinating to me, the people who are in this space, because at bottom, a lot of the things that she's recommending in this Good Energy book and elsewhere just kind of boil down to pretty commonsensical good ideas, right? About living in the modern world. Get more sunlight, get more sleep, drink more water, eat less processed foods, a lot of things like that. But it's bolted on to this, a person might charitably say pseudoscientific, or maybe that's uncharitable, I don't know. A person might call it pseudoscientific, sort of holistic explanation for why all of these things are contributing to your metabolic health, the kind of core energies that are going through you and making you less at risk for different cancers and diabetes and all sorts of different things in the way that she lays it out. And then you also have to talk about the way that whole infrastructure is connected to some increasingly sort of alarming stuff that's going on in the RFK type orbit, where it's the same sort of wellness speak that gets deployed to talk about, you know, the supposed dangers of pediatric vaccines, or the supposed dangers of, you know, chemicals in the jet fuel overhead, as Will, you've reported a lot about with RFK.
Well, and Casey Means is right there with you on the chemtrails.
I didn't know that. Can you talk to me about that?
So yeah. So let's talk about some of her beliefs. So as you said, it starts with this very almost like, I don't know, like we're going to Coachella, kind of a chill vibe, kind of California. We're gonna have some avocado toast. And as you mentioned, a lot of it is that like metabolism and metabolic health. And you know, I think the Means are very good at. They don't come off like raving lunatics, and perhaps they aren't. But it's a very acceptable kind of like a Whole Foods thing where they say, you know, well, doctors should tell people to eat well. Well, as some of even the Means' critics on the right have pointed out, there are a lot of doctors who are like, you need to eat more Lucky Charms and Doritos, right? I mean, that's kind of already built in. But then when you get below the surface, she gets a lot more like back to nature. She's really against like damming rivers and lakes. You know, that kind of pops up a lot. She believes that all bodies should be composted. And so then we start getting, you know, speaking of compost, we're kind of getting the layers here, right? As you said, vaccines. She's kind of like anti-vax light. She's like kind of skeptical of vaccines. And, you know, maybe we get too many vaccines. So that's sort of where
the pediatric vaccination schedule is, I think, the main thing that she's pushed, as well as some COVID vaccine skepticism. But the idea of
And I mean, in terms of the chemtrails, I mean, I saw she went on Kristen Cavallari, if people remember the OC. Or not the OC, excuse me, the Hills, you know, Laguna Beach. She went on her show, and Kristen Cavallari says, like, what's up with all these chemtrails? And she said, well, you know, I don't know. There are like a lot of weird lines in the old sky. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff she's kind of signaling to this MAGA movement, or excuse me, to kind of the further side, fringier side. But I think Casey and Callie Means kind of represent a more respectable, such as it is, version of that. And to be frank, that has infuriated a lot of anti-vaccine people who see her and her brother as sort of diluting the force of anti-vaccine stuff in pursuit of like, let's get the wrong chemical additives out of potato chips, which they seem as sort of a pointless diversion.
Right. Yeah, sort of an anti-vaxxer in name only sort of situation. A squish, a MAGA squish. In the view of some of these very far out there people. Let me back up just a little bit, Jonathan. This is a lot about Casey Means. You know, we're kind of talking about her in the orbit of RFK. Actually, she and her brother were weirdly enough, reportedly the couple who introduced, or at least kind of hooked up Trump and RFK as kind of campaign fellow travelers and buddies last year after the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. So they're kind of big players in the way that certain elements of the 2024 election went down. But just to back up a little bit more, can you just talk a little bit to us about what it actually means that she's being appointed or being nominated to serve as Surgeon General? I mean, it's a largely symbolic role, but what does the Surgeon General do? What are they kind of responsible for?
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, Surgeon General is one of the oldest offices in the United States. I mean, actually traces all the way back to 1798. It's originally started as sort of, you know, care for mariners and the mariners service, and evolved into a uniformed service. And the Surgeon General is in charge of this uniformed service of medical officers of the United States. Technically, now, a lot of that responsibility was stripped in modern times. And as you say, today it's mostly not so much about, it's not really a line job where you have authority over people and programs. What the Surgeon General does have is a really important public platform. And over the last few decades, they have used that platform to issue reports, do, you know, public speaking, public writing. It's actually been fairly influential. You know, it was a Surgeon General's report back in the 1960s that smoking was, you know, hazardous to your health, and led to the famous, you know, the warning label we still have on, you know, cigarette packs. In the 1980s, a report that the Surgeon General did on AIDS was really a pivotal moment in shaping public perceptions about HIV and AIDS at a time when it was sort of, you know, being sort of, you know, sort of cordoned off as a sort of gay disease, and there was a lot of discrimination involved in this sort of C. Edward. God, it's been a while. Everett, I think it was C. Everett Koop was the Surgeon General, issued this report. It was a really big moment. More recently, we've had a Surgeon General do a report on gun violence, on maternal health, on mental health and addiction. And these reports really can really be play a big role in shaping the public perceptions, shaping the political dialogue, and lead to real action. Looking back, that report on smoking, I mean, most people, if you look back, the sort of decline in smoking in America is considered one of the great public health victories of the modern era. And that report was a really big part of it. So, here we have, Means as Surgeon General would be in a position to issue reports, and really kind of focus on, bring new issues to light. And the funny thing is, when you listen to them on Rogan, as Will was just talking about, a lot of what they say about the healthcare system, it's sort of not enough emphasis on keeping people healthy, the extent to which the pharmaceutical industry has too much influence. There's a lot of people who agree with that.
Yeah,
I would agree with a lot of that.
Yeah.
And you can imagine a world where she in that position could do some good if that's what, but then again, a lot of what she does for reasons Will was just explaining, really a lot of, the scientific establishment looks and says, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? And so, that is the question, how would she use that platform?
Yeah, it really is striking the degree to which we're in a system now where like the main institutional critique of things like big pharma, like if you're the kind of person who thinks big pharma has too much power, thinks there's too much processed food, going into American gullets, think people don't exercise enough, think people don't get enough natural light, like the main power center for putting any of that stuff into action seems to right now in America be this MAGA movement that's allied with the current president, allied with the current Secretary of Health and Human Services, and which also has a complete allergy to doing any kind of crank policing in its ranks at all, right? I mean, like you can see that, and this is kind of the main question with Casey Means is some of these people far out to the right are like, wow, well, does she really care about chemtrails? Does she really have concerns about pediatric vaccinations, or is she just saying that stuff to get in good with us? And meanwhile, how insane is it to live in a world where the nominee for Surgeon General of the United States would possibly be incentivized to get in good with those particular people? I mean, we're just so upside down in terms of the political incentives here. Jonathan, I wanted to ask you as well, just about what you see as. I mean, again, this is Trump had a Surgeon General pick before who was plenty right wing, but kind of more of the certainly not this exact same like MAGA flavor. What do you make of kind of the tea leaves of Trump now? Making this shift and I guess giving this extra vote of confidence, at least that's the way I read it, to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I continue to still puzzle over the sort of RFK-Trump relationship. I mean, my assumption with Trump is that everything is transactional. And so, do we think Donald Trump has spent a lot of time thinking about wellness and health, or spends a lot of time thinking about it now? I mean, this is Mr. Big Mac, right? I mean, I think, RFK was useful to him, has been useful to him, continues to be useful to him. And so he's happy, he doesn't care either way. So he's happy to give RFK kind of free reign over at, Department of Health and Human Services. And I do think there's some overlap there. The RFK agenda, you can kind of draw a Venn diagram, right, of the sort of RFK agenda, Trump's desire to kind of beat up on the medical establishment he still is angry with from COVID, and then the sort of other parts of the right wing universe that just want, see the sort of, the woke conspiracy in government and academia. And you kind of draw those three circles. It's a pretty big Venn diagram, and HHS is right in the middle of it. So, I mean, I think, that's what's happening here. And every appointee, I remember when he first appointed RFK, I was like, well, let's see who the deputies are. How else does the rest of the department get filled out? And we've seen appointee after appointee at FDA, at NIH, are people who share, all fit within those three, in that Venn diagram, in that middle ground. And so that's where they're going. So to me, Means is part of that, in terms of the where in that universe, that I don't know. Again, I defer to Will on that, because I don't know.
So this is kind of the other beat here. So this happened, Wednesday night, that this this original Surgeon General nominee got booted out. And a lot of that is, I think, being attributed to her being poleaxed by Laura Loomer, the right-wing activist, right, who has this kind of little side business going on where she highlights what are no longer sort of acceptable MAGA opinions people have had in the past on her Twitter account, and then I think makes them sort of toxic within Trump world. So she says, well, this doctor, she thought people should wear masks at one point during COVID. And so suddenly they go, oh no. So that in part helped push this Surgeon General nominee out. So you might think she's thrilled with Casey Means. Not so. Laura Loomer now has been on the attack against Casey Means, saying, oh, she can't really practice as a doctor right now. She changed her name at one point. I looked into this. It seems relatively mild. She dropped Paula as her first name. I don't blame her. So there's that. But maybe more interesting, Nicole Shanahan, RFK's running mate in the presidential race, she ripped into RFK last night and said, I don't know, was RFK lying to me the whole time? I don't like this lady. What's going on here? And suggested maybe RFK is being blackmailed by someone, which kind of plays into this idea that RFK is being blackmailed by Israel, popular conspiracy theory these days. And so what is going on here? Well, I don't know what Laura Loomer is up to. I think she's up to something. But in the case of Nicole Shanahan, this is someone who is very much an anti-vax person. She got into this stuff because I believe one of her relatives has autism. That's how she got into it. And so, as I mentioned, the means are seen as kind of squishes, as like posers in the anti-vax space. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah. And again, like, can I just belabor this point of how shocking and just really remarkable it is to just imagine that anybody that you're not a real anti-vax crank, but you have to pretend that you're a real anti-vax crank in order to shore up support and get in good with the current administration or with the MAGA movement or whatever. It's just so amazing and remarkable and appalling to think about in those terms. Not to over editorialize over the top of you guys. But yeah, I guess we can probably leave it at that, right? Anything else to do? What we miss? What did we miss? I guess we got through the whole video without forgetting that Casey is the sister and Callie is the brother, which has been a hard thing for me forever.
I'm with you. I mix them up in my head.
Same. We should mention, she had a license in Oregon, according to public records, but it's now inactive. Not, it wasn't suspended or anything, just it's inactive because she, but it seems to be, I think people are still doing the background historical research on this. This just happened last night, but she would be the first Surgeon General in modern times, certainly, to not have an active license to practice medicine. And, I imagine she and her supporters would say, yes, that's the whole point. We need to totally shake up, the medical establishment. I think there are a lot of other people who would kind of say, wait a minute, this must be, basically the most important visible doctor in America, and it's someone who can't practice medicine. So, ponder that.
Do not permit the incoming Surgeon General to perform surgery on you. Okay, thanks, guys. This was fun. We'll keep following this. Obviously, who knows? Lots of twists and turns ahead in the confirmation of the incoming, potentially, Surgeon General. Thanks to everybody out there for watching. Hope you subscribe. Hope you head to thebulwark.com and read our stuff. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.